everybody, welcome back to my corner of the internet. My name is Lowry if you are new here, and today I've just got a regular podcast episode, so I just thought I would update you on where I'm at with my whips, any new cast-ons. I've got a couple of acquisitions to show you, so just the kind of regular format today. I recently uploaded my kind of warmer weather knitting patterns video, kind of my spring/summer knitting planning or knitting inspiration. I don't think I'll get through all of those patterns in that video, but I'm not planning to. You may see a couple of things in this that are related to that video. So without further ado, we'll start with my current whips. I don't have any finished objects to show you, but I do have a whip that hasn't yet been seen on a regular podcast episode. So this is my Cumulus Blouse by PetiteKnit. This is the V-neck version, which I believe is kind of the first version that was released. I am knitting this with Filcolana Merci in the colour Duckling. I've talked about this yarn on the podcast before. I intended to use it originally to knit the blouse number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. But if you watch my last spring-summer planning video, then you'll know that I was grossly off gauge with this yarn, and I just didn't really want to try and finesse the gauge that much. It's knit with quite a lot of negative ease, so I was quite worried about how being so off gauge would affect the overall fit of the pattern. So I just decided that I would look for other patterns that I was on gauge for that were kind of similarly blouse style, and what I landed on was actually the Cumulus Blouse. Now it does have a very different fit. It's really oversized, which you probably can't tell right now because I'm only partway through the body, but it's very oversized, but I like that. The pattern is a fairly straightforward single stitch raglan. It has a V-neck, which I've not done on like a sweater construction before, but I've done plenty of like V-neck cardigans. It's kind of much of the same thing. It's a very basic pattern, but I'm hoping I will get good wear out of it in kind of cooler summer evenings, kind of into fall. The Filcolana Merci is 50% cotton and 50% merino wool, superwash merino wool. So I will be able to wash it if I need to. But it also has that cotton to kind of add a bit of breathability. So I'm hoping I'll be able to get a lot of wear out of this and that it'll be quite versatile. Not right now though, because it's boiling right now, hence I'm wearing no knitwear, because I couldn't even imagine putting on linen right now. Everything I own is, even in summer fibres, is quite chunky and not what I want. I don't really have much to say about this, to be honest. I did a bit of a botch job of binding off my I-cord finish around the neck. I can't be bothered to unpick it. I would say actually about the yarn that it's kind of fluffing up already around the top of the neck and the back, kind of the places that I knit first and that have been done for a little while. It's knitting up very quickly. It's an enjoyable project. I'm using 5mm needles, which is up from the 4.5 recommended in the pattern in order to get gauge. It's enjoyable, it's going by really quickly. Yeah, I would say the yarn is starting to fluff up a little bit, and I haven't even worn it yet, so we'll see if that's just kind of an initial shed or whether that's going to continue with wear. It is superwash. I've never worked with superwash before. I'm hoping the 50% cotton will kind of give it a little bit more, I don't know, structural integrity maybe? We'll see. The sleeves and the body have you do an I-cord bind off that involves decreases, so occasionally asks you to do a knit 3 together through the back loop rather than the usual knit 2 together that you would use for an I-cord bind off. I was initially kind of hesitant of that. It's, I think, not the neatest way of binding off. Like, I think it would be neater if I cast off a regular cast off and then picked up for the I-cord, and just picked up like 2 in every 3 stitches. But it's actually not that bad, so I was debating not doing it for the body, but I might actually just do it now. I think this will be finished really soon. I recently, like earlier today, finished the second sleeve, so I've just got the body left to do, left to pick up, and I think that'll go by really quickly. I'm feeling really motivated to finish that now. I would say though, actually, I think, I'll hold my breath a little bit, but I think I have broken my short sleeve sweater curse. So normally I knit sleeves, I knit them to a point where I think they'll be long enough once they've been blocked. And sometimes they are for like the first few wears, couple of wears, and then they just seem to shrink. All my sleeves seem to shrink, and I think that's because there's kind of, it gets this creasing around the elbow, and maybe that's just what happens with wear. I know a lot of people say it happens with the knitting for olive merino and the heavy merino particularly, which is definitely something that I found. But I managed to knit my sleeves to the right length with the cloud blouse, which was my last long sleeve completed project, and I've tried this on. The sleeves come down to my hands. I think I might have done it. I think I might have normal full length sleeves on this garment, so yay! But that's all I have to say about my Cumulus blouse, I think. The original is knit in 2 strands of mohair. That is not something you will catch me doing. I'm quite sensitive to mohair. I can't imagine wearing mohair next to my skin by itself, like not with another yarn quality. But you can substitute so many things in and out for mohair, and they don't even need to be, it doesn't even need to be 2 lace weights. It doesn't even need to be something that functions like mohair, like an alpaca. It's your knitting projects. You can substitute in whatever yarn quality you so desire. So I substituted in this, and I'm happy with it. So there you go. I was expecting to have that Cumulus blouse done, to be honest, by the time I recorded this, but I've just had a really busy few weeks, and I kind of lost motivation when I finished the first sleeve to pick up the next one. So I just left it kind of languishing for maybe a week or so, because I just didn't want to pick up the 6 stitches in the underarm to knit the sleeve, which doesn't normally happen to me. I don't normally get a block with knitting sleeves. I don't normally experience sleeve island. But yeah, we found the motivation again. That's all that matters. My next whip is one that has been seen before, and to be honest, I don't know if I've made that much progress since this was last shown. I can't remember where this was at when I last showed this on the podcast. But this is my Solene Cardigan by Morecaknit, and I'm knitting this with hand-dyed Falklands merino wool in a DK weight, and the knitting for olive mohair in the colour Dusty Dove Blue. I don't think I'd joined in the round by the time I'd filmed the last podcast, so maybe that's new, but I've joined in the round and I've made a little bit of progress. Not very much. Just joined in the round. That's literally it. I probably won't show this whip often on the podcast now, because this has kind of become a bit of a background whip. Just because it's summer, it's June, I don't want to be working with wool and particularly mohair during this heat. So I'm not really working on it very often, but I occasionally pick it up and do a couple of rows and put it back down again. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Mostly just to say you might not see it very often, but it will kind of be in the background. Something else that I have started since my last podcast episode is a Sophie Scarf, which might not seem seasonally appropriate, but I'm imagining this will be worn a bit more like an accessory, maybe even as a head kind of tie, bandana. I don't own the pattern for the Sophie Scarf. It's a very popular pattern by PetiteKnit. I do own the pattern for the Sophie Shawl. I know that the Sophie Scarf increases at a slightly slower rate, so I'm just kind of doing that and modifying the Sophie Shawl pattern slightly. I'm using one ball of Cardiff Cashmere Brushlight in... Hello. Yeah, the cat's come to join me. I'm using one ball of Cardiff Cashmere Brushlight in their colour Muji, which I have left over from my cloud blouse. I ordered this when I realised that I was going to run out of the Cardiff Cashmere, and it was completely the wrong dye lot, although it looked quite similar. And then I happened to be in London in Beautiful Knitters, and they had a ball in that was exactly the right dye lot. So I just bought it, so I wasn't worrying about kind of dye lot. But that does mean I had this extra ball that was a different dye lot to do something with. So I decided I would make a Sophie Scarf because the owner, maybe, of Beautiful Knitters showed me like a sample that they had on the table that she'd knit in one ball of Cardiff Cashmere Brushlight, and she said it made the smallest size. So I just thought I will increase until I've used about half of this weight, and then I will decrease, and that is that. This is kind of something that I'm just working on in the background. This is kind of my travel project, that's why I cast it on. I don't knit socks, and I was going on quite a long train journey but didn't have much room to carry a bigger project. So I decided to cast this on. And I'm just kind of working on it whenever I'm kind of travelling or whenever I'm kind of going somewhere that I've only got little bits of time to pick something up and do a couple of rows. I find I can generally read my increases on this pattern relatively easily. I don't typically lose track of kind of which row I'm on, but otherwise it's just a really kind of easy basic pattern. I know I've talked about the Sophie Shawl on here before, and I know you've probably heard a million other people talk about the Sophie Shawl or the Sophie Scarf. It's like every man and his dog has made one of these. It's just a really kind of easy, bitty travel project. So there you go. This is probably going to prove quite a quick podcast episode because I don't have a huge amount to update on, and I feel like I got through my whips very quickly. Probably because there's not a huge amount of progress, although I've made a lot of progress on my Cumulus Blouse. But the kind of existing whips don't have a huge amount of progress on them. Because that Solene Cardigan is kind of going to become a long-term kind of background whip, while it's not sort of seasonally appropriate, I'm going to cast something else on, probably before I finish my Cumulus Blouse, and that is the Sabai top. And I have bought, for the Sabai top, some yarn. A little while ago, Knit, the yarn shop in London, was having the owner was having a birthday sale, and it was 10% off your order, whatever it was. So I thought I would buy some yarn for the next couple of projects that I have in mind. And I bought some yarn for the Sabai top. So I bought the Sandnes Garn Lena in the colour 8521, which was the colour that I was intending to buy for this project in my kind of warmer weather knitting patterns video. I'm really glad that this yarn is kind of what it looks like in person, what it looks like online. So it just looks like a really muted sage green, which is exactly what I wanted. Let me see if I can show you. If you can see there. It's just a really lovely sage green. Yeah, I'm very excited to work that up. The Sabai top is by Paulastrickt. I will be knitting the second size, I believe. And I think I'm just going to cast it on and get going, because I know from knitting the Alva top by We Made Wardrobe, so I test knitted that for them earlier in the year, and I used Sandnes Lena to knit that top. And initially when I gauge swatched for that on the 4mm needles, which is what's recommended in the pattern, I was off gauge, and I'm pretty sure while I was off gauge for that pattern, the gauge that I got is what's called for in the Sabai top, if that makes sense. Basically, I'm pretty confident that on a 4mm needle, which is what's recommended in the pattern, I'll be on gauge. So I'm just going to get started. I'm going to knit the version that has kind of a ribbed detail along here, so it's sort of a sleeveless summer top. It's kind of got a really lovely boat neckline, and you can either knit it kind of with no finishings and it's just kind of stockinette all the way down, or you can knit it with a little bit of ribbing along the neckline, and that's what I'm going to do. I think from looking at other projects and things, although Sandnes Lena I've found doesn't typically roll very much, I think the ribbing edge will sort of help to prevent any rolling if it does decide it wants to do that. Whereas I think the kind of just raw stockinette edge might have a tendency to roll forwards a little bit more, which is just not a design feature that I want out of this particular top. So I'm excited to get that cast on, and then when I have finished my Cumulus Blouse, which I think will be quite soon, I'm going to cast on the blouse number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. Yay! Finally! I ordered for that the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which is what's recommended in the pattern, or what the kind of designer knits first sample in. And I ordered it in the colour Poppy Rose. This is, I would say this is not quite what it looks like online. I think Knitting for Olive are quite bad at taking photos of some of the kind of yarn colours that they have. They don't always look the same in person as they do online. But I did a lot of Instagram scrolling to find people who were currently using this yarn to see if I could kind of get a look at it in different lights. And I'm really happy with this. It's so gorgeous. Look at it. It's just such a beautiful shade of pink. I'm so excited to knit this. I, again, will be knitting the second size, I think. I'll correct that if that's wrong on screen somewhere or in the description box. But I'm pretty sure I'm knitting the second size. hopefully I will be closer to on gauge with the kind of the original yarn that the designer used than I was with the Filcolana Merci. So I think that's all I have to share at the moment. That was a quicker update, not a huge amount of progress or kind of knitting happening recently. I've had a very busy few weeks at work. We've just recently finished doing like summer school residentials, which are really fun but really exhausting and take up more than my usual 9 to 5, so not a huge amount of time to kind of knit during that or kind of in the run-up to that. But hopefully now that things are slowing down, generally my work is a bit quieter over the summer, so I'm looking forward to getting some knitting time in, and I'm really excited to start some new projects. I'm itching to just cast something new on. So maybe I'll cast on the Sabai top tonight, we'll see. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely week, a lovely day. I am wishing you rest and wellness, and if you are playing Yarn Chicken this week, I hope you win. Bye everybody!